when I talk about my love of wine, it's not an analysis of it. I want to lose myself in my subject and capture that feeling that wine gives us into words, and yet not reduce it down to fruit salad and a number. The heartbreaker was that Keats didn't want his name on his tombstone. He wrote, "Here lies one whose name was writ in water." And that inspired me to draft my own tombstone inscription. "Here lies one whose name shall be consumed with wine." Would that we all had a good friend who will remember us and with whom we can share a good glass of wine.
Oh, that is the best tie-in story ever. That is truly the best tie-in story ever.
Oh, thanks. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 196. How does John Keats connect the Romantic poets to wine? Why should you consider champagne for other occasions outside of big celebrations? And how do you handle the nasty sting of rejection as an up-and-coming writer? You'll hear those tips and stories as I chat with Lori Budd, winemaker, writer, and host of Exploring the Wine Glass podcast. Lori is actually interviewing me in this episode. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show with the continuing saga of publishing my new wine memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. As I mentioned last week, I'm now into the copy editing phase for the book. Here are a few more things I'm doing to give it that extra buff and polish. I'm looking for overused words and phrases. Not only are these boring and annoying to readers, but it also means I'm on autopilot as a writer and need to dig deeper to find new ways to express myself. Stock phrases can also be a defense mechanism against revealing more vulnerable thoughts and feelings. I'm also trying to get rid of words that put a wall between the reader and me, such as thought, saw, realized, knew, started to. For example, instead of saying, "I saw that Mom had laid out the glassware on the table," rephrase that to, "Mom's glassware on the table glinted in the morning sunlight." In the first sentence, you're seeing the glassware through my eyes. That's a filter. In the second sentence, you're seeing the glassware for yourself. You're right in the scene. I'll share more of these next week. I'd love to hear from you. How do you improve your writing? I've posted a link to a blog post called Diary of a Book Launch in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/196. This is also where I share more behind-the-scenes stories about the journey of taking this memoir from idea to publication. If you want a more intimate insider seat beside me on this journey, please let me know you'd like to become a beta reader and get a sneak peek at the manuscript. Email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. Okay, on with the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. I am your host, Lori, and today I am very honored to have a very special guest, Natalie McLean from up north. So welcome, Natalie. How are you?
It's great to be here, Lori. I'm sure it's a lot warmer where you are, but wine will keep us warm.
Wine will keep us warm. And sadly enough, we just got an Amazon alert that we are going into a freeze warning for the next 3 days. Ooh. So I don't know if it's warmer or not, but it's whoa. I like when that alert comes off on Amazon, I'm like, hello. Are you sure you're talking about the right area?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But luckily we have wine and it will keep us warm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So again, I am so honored to have you on the podcast.
It's my pleasure.
Anybody who thinks wine, your name comes up synonymously with it. Whether they're up north in Canada or in the United States, it must be an incredible feeling to be so recognized with wine. Like it must feel like quite the accomplishment, first of all, right?
Well, thank you. I feel like, sometimes as a big fish swimming in a very tiny pond, in terms of wine lovers are a very specific group, but I love them. They're my people. You're my people, of course, Lori. But no, over time, I just love connecting with people in all the different ways that we can these days, whether it's online or through books or whatever. That's my jam.
That is awesome. And we're going to get into wine, obviously. But before we get into wine, I just have to ask, you actually studied romantic poets at Oxford. That is, I mean, almost a 180 from wine, right? So how did you get into romantic poets? And then we have to know who your favorite poet is.
Okay, absolutely. So hands down, it was John Keats. And I have a story about him, Lori, that will actually magically tie together the romantic poets and wine. So this is from my memoir that I'm currently writing, but I'd love to share it with you if you're good with that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So several years ago, I was on a walking tour, Rome's lesser known food haunts with my partner, Miles, and my son. And I was thrilled when we accidentally came across Keats's burial place. And his tombstone was tucked away in a remote corner of this graveyard, and it was inscribed with his quote, "Ode to a Grecian Urn." That's the one he's best known for, I think. "Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all you need to know on earth, and all you need to know." Something like that. I'm mangling him, even so. Call me morbid, but I think walking through a graveyard on our way to a cheese shop made perfect sense because we were blending life and death and eating and satiation. In my first two books and in my writing, I adopted kind of the new journalism approach to writing. So what they believed, like Joan Didion and Truman Capote, was do the thing you write about. And so instead of interviewing a sommelier, I became one for a night, so that I could get a deeper, richer experience to write about. I worked in a wine store, I worked the harvest, and we could talk more about that later. But my earliest inspiration, Lori, was actually Keats, because his work was the subject of my final paper at Oxford, and particularly his belief in what he called negative capability. So he tried to forget himself and become one with his subject, like the urn. And he was trying to capture that pure experience in words. So truth for him was the urn's beauty itself, not some cold, distant, objective analysis of the urn. And so I really resonated with that. Like when I talk about my love of wine, it's not an analysis of it. I really want to lose myself in my subject and capture that feeling that wine gives us into words, and yet not reduce it down to fruit salad and a number. So I'll wrap this long-winded story up. The heartbreaker was that Keats didn't want his name on his tombstone. He felt that he had contributed nothing to the world before he died at just 25 years old, TB. And also on his tombstone, he wrote, "Here lies one whose name was writ in water." And was really melancholy sentiment because he thought everyone would forget about him. And that inspired me to draft my own tombstone inscription, Lori. "Here lies one in time whose name shall be consumed with wine." So several decades later, Keats' good friend Joseph Severin died, and he arranged for his tombstone to be placed next to Keats to indicate that the nameless tombstone beside him belonged to the immortal English poet, ensuring that future generations would know Keats's burial place. And all I can say is, would that we all had a good friend who will remember us and with whom we can share a good glass of wine.
Oh, that is the best tie-in story ever. That is truly the best tie-in story ever.
Oh, thanks. Thought it was a stretch, but I tried to lasso them together.
And by the way, going through cemeteries is actually one of my favorite things to do whenever we go away. They're just more beautiful there. There's something beautiful about them. But there's some areas here in the United States that just have, the older cemeteries. And do you know there's a term for cemetery lover without being a
Is
weird?
there?
It is a
Go ahead.
tapophile.
A tapophile.
I found that out when we went to Scotland and the beautiful cemeteries there. And we were going through them all. And we travel all over. We were in Rome. We were going through the cemeteries, looking for the famous people and just walking through them because there's something peaceful about them. And really, they're beautiful. They're elegant. They're beautiful. And you think about what these people's lives were like. So it's kind of like a
Yes.
reflection on, even though I don't know who you are, I'm appreciating you as a person because I'm taking time to look at your stone.
Absolutely. And there's another new term that you might like, hobbyists who go and visit graveyards. It's called graving. And there's a whole tourism industry getting built up around graving. So we're off to a morbid start here, but I think it's a perfect combination with wine because there's something immortal about wine. There's something you always remember where you were with a memorable bottle. And I
Absolutely.
just love, like I visited Evita's tombstone when I went to Buenos Aires to write about Argentine wine.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved it. And there were very vicious hungry cats surrounding her tombstone. You couldn't get too close. But, I visited graveyards even when I was on assignment for something completely different and didn't write about it. But it's a little heartbreaking. But sometimes the tiny tombstones of children, and they're right
Mhm.
beside their families, and there's a story there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree. And some of my friends are like, that's a little strange. You go to cemeteries, and I'm like, just try it.
Yeah.
It really is an amazing feeling. I think you get to get a sense of those people who were there and trying to sense how they were. And you're right, the families are all around.
It's a reminder of our own mortality. I don't think it's morbid at all. It's like carpe diem, seize the day.
Yeah,
You're on top of the ground now, but soon you'll join us. And so,
absolutely
like,
right.
live life. Life's too short for a bad bottle of wine, etc. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And that is so true, right? And that goes to my saying of, I will never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass, right? If you
Yes.
like the wine, drink it. And if it's
Amen.
in my glass, it will be in your glass too if you want
That's a
it.
great approach, Lori.
So again, I was blown away. I say all the time that, I'm like the little Googler and I'm like, stalking the person when I go to interview them. But I find out these cool things that I'm like, okay, we have to talk about this. Highland dancing.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh my God. I absolutely love it. Bagpipes and me, like, it's such an amazing sound. It goosebumps, everything.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into that?
You say bagpipes. That brings back another story for me. I was interviewed by a local radio reporter at a Highland Games when I was about 9 years old. And he said, "You must really like the sound of bagpipes, eh?" And I said, "No, they sound like cats screaming." Back to cats. I practiced with Whitney Houston at home, Whitney Houston music. So, but I think my stance on bagpipe music has softened since then. It was just probably way too loud, but I'm with you. When I listen to like Paul McCartney's Mull of Kintyre, I can't help but tear up. It's just so beautiful. But they need to be in a distance, not
They
right
can
up
be
beside
they
you.
can be piercing if you're right there, and they're right there when you're dancing.
Exactly, exactly. And you're under stress. So it's probably some sort of psychosomatic association I have with bagpipes and competing. But Highland dancing gave me the gifts of focus and discipline and, a maniacal work ethic. So I'll forever be grateful to having done that for, I guess it was close to 18 years. And then I opened a dance school when I was younger. So that got me through university. So it gave me many gifts.
It's such a unique form of dancing, and I don't know, it's repetitive, but not in a bad way. Like, as a viewer, you get lulled in and you just start, like, looking, and I don't know, again, with the bagpipes there, it just resonates with me, goes more so than I think any other
Hmm.
instrument.
That's because you're back on the stands. You're like
That is
getting it
true.
piped right into your ear directly.
That is
But
true.
yeah.
Yeah, I can give you that. I can give you that. All right. Now that we're done with that part, we can actually get into the wine. I always need to know the origin story. So, how did you find your way to wine, or how did wine find you?
That's a good way to put it. So after I met my husband, we both did the same MBA program. We moved to Toronto and we wanted to find something to do as a couple in the evenings. He was on Bay Street, which is our equivalent to Wall Street. I worked at Procter and Gamble, like Crisco and Duncan Hines and Pringles. So we worked long hours and we wanted to find something after work we could do together. And so at first we tried Spanish lessons, and conjugating verbs after a long day at work was just a no-go. I would like to be able to say the Spanish equivalent of no-go, Nova or whatever, but I
Yeah,
can't even
Nova.
remember. Nova. Okay.
Nova.
Okay. So one thing stuck with us, stuck with me there. We also tried golf, but for type A personalities with long iron clubs in hand, that was not a good formula either. We just got so frustrated and stressed out. But then I saw in this brochure that came to our house a wine course. So we could take a wine course at night. I thought, yes, we can drink for sure. And that'll be relaxing. And, we both loved wine. We knew nothing about it. So we enrolled in this wine course and it was so much fun. But I remember the first night they poured I don't know, 7 samples of only an ounce or two. But I'd had a long day at work, so I just knock them all back. And, the equivalent of a glass or whatever it would have been. And then I looked around, saw no one else was doing that. And I was so embarrassed. It was like my introduction to tasting, not drinking. Slow down. But anyway, we loved it. I continued on and completed a sommelier certificate program. And my husband did not, but he just, defaulted to me on the wine choices after that.
That's fantastic. And I think that's so what brings a lot of couples together, over wine or whiskey or whatever it is. It's because you're sitting down and it's something that you're sharing between you that is exactly the same.
Yes. And it slows you down. Yeah.
It slows you down. It gives you something to talk about. And even though it's the same exact wine that's in your glass, you have different perspectives of what it is. And it's not I say blue and you say orange, so we're going to argue over it. It's it's like, oh, really? I think it's more of this field, or I think it's red fruit, it's a strawberry. No, I think it's a cherry. Okay, we can agree with that.
Exactly. And then you can get into food pairings or whatever, or memorable bottles from where you traveled, because those come back to me immediately because, as you know, smell and taste are directly tied to memory and emotion. And so I will remember the first time we had a certain bottle. And it seems weird sometimes that comes back immediately, but I don't think so. With the way our brains are wired, for me, it's easy to remember exactly the first time I had certain wines.
Right, absolutely. And we have a little display, if you can call it that, of those memorable wines, the bottles, and when you look at that bottle, it brings back that memory of instantaneous.
Exactly. You remember where you were, the context. I remember what we were wearing, the food we were eating, where we were sitting, say, in a restaurant. Anyway, it just all unfolds.
Right. So that actually leads right into my next question is give a story of one of your most memorable wines and why it was so memorable. What about it?
Sure. This is a memory from my first book, Red, White, and Drunk All Over. So I had the privilege of visiting the champagne house Louis Roederer, and they make Cristal, which is beautiful, beautiful, top-notch champagne. So I remember sitting in this elegant drawing room and, there was burgundy brocade, like burgundy velvet drapes and brocade ropes and all the rest of it. And I stared really thirstily at the bottle of 1995 Cristal that my host was opening. And she said, I'm so glad you came to visit because we don't get to drink Cristal very often because Cristal is on allocation. Every bottle is sold before it's shipped. And it's kind of a favorite bubbly dating back to the Emperor Alexander, the Tsar of Russia in 1837 to rap stars like Jay-Z, who's mentioned it in some of his songs. So it has a long history and it's very coveted. But I think the way we enjoyed it, champagne is the drink of celebration, weddings, birthdays, and so on. But it's also, for me, a very intimate ritual that can transport you to a very, very private world. And I just loved it. I felt that way as we were sipping on our Cristal. There was an adagio of the senses is kind of what I wrote about in Red, White, and Drunk All Over. So there was that cold sweating bottle, the glinting stemware, the frothy pour, the small wrist action of raising the glass, and that sort of ocean spritz on your face, and then the mouth-filling flavor. And I just remember thinking
I'm drooling.
Yeah. So am I. I'm kind of slavering. We're going to. But I remember raising the glass to my lips and thinking, I am breathing in earth and sky here. And, the aromas were like pastry wrapped pears and honey and spice. And they sort of burst like little beads in my mouth from the bubbles. And, long after I swallowed, I could still feel those sort of ghostly bubbles tickling the roof of my mouth. And I actually wanted to lick my glass when it was empty, but I thought, that's just undignified behavior, Nat, in the presence of this beautiful champagne. So control yourself. Anyway, it was beautiful. Just a beautiful experience.
You mean this isn't like the spinner of a chocolate cake?
No, exactly. It was so, yeah.
That is amazing. I have not had that pleasure of tasting Cristal, but that's interesting. I didn't know every bottle was sold before it was even produced. That's a nice situation to be in.
Oh, yeah, it's great if you're collecting the money. But, I don't know what they sell for because that was my first and last experience of Cristal, but it's probably it's somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a bottle, something like that. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? When you have the money, why not?
Sure. Or if someone's pouring it for you, of
Absolutely.
course. Yes, I'll have
Absolutely.
a second glass, please.
In 1995, that's my husband's and my wedding anniversary is 1995. So I
lovely.
am always on a mission to find 1995 wines so that when we have an anniversary, I can open a bottle of 1995 wine.
Oh, that's a great idea.
But I think I'll get divorced if I bring that bottle and he realizes how much it costs.
Oh, this old thing? I've had this for a long time. It's like how you dismiss purchases.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't.
In the cellar.
Yeah. Right. So earlier you had said that you follow in like Keats's theory of be as opposed to observe. All right. So you are actually an accredited sommelier, a wine writer, a wine speaker, a judge. You do this podcast. I mean, you really do have your hands in everything. So is there one aspect of what you do that you actually like better than others?
I think writing itself will always be my first love, even though I came to it last. So I took all those sommelier courses first without even thinking I could be paid to write. It was a confidence thing. So I was in marketing and, I loved writing customer success stories, but I never thought, hey, you love this part of your job so much. Why not try to make it a full-time thing? So I hosted wine tastings after I got more confidence. Eventually I got there. I was on maternity leave and, I pitched a local magazine about wine on the internet when that was actually a story angle. And that led me to other columns and articles and gave me the confidence to say, hey, I can do this full time. But now the books I read and the courses I take, they're all focused on the craft of writing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know what you feel about the confidence. I'm type B, as type B can be. And I'm a Sagittarius, so like I am meant to be in the spotlight. Like that is where I enjoy being. But it's a difficult thing to pitch an article. Like I am just getting into the freelance thing. And it's kind of disheartening. You have this idea, you pitch it, and then crickets.
Yeah.
You hear nothing.
Yes.
They accept the article. And then what you think, I think I'm a decent writer. Everybody tells me I'm a decent writer. And then it comes back with like, edit this, edit this, edit this, And it takes a little of a hard shell to not take it personally. But I understand that I am just getting into that freelance and knowing how to, which I don't know yet, but knowing how to pitch and get the articles to the magazines that I want them or that I think they should be in or whatever. So
absolutely. It is an ego shrinking profession to try to write and to keep pitching. And no one sees how many times you go up to bat and you're just rejected or crickets or whatever. But I guess it's just the same sort of pathological optimism that some winemakers have. You just keep going and going and going and trying and pitching and pitching.
Yeah. And it's funny because on that realm, I'm quite okay with that. Like I get everybody's not going to love our wine. When you go to pour their bottle, it's always exciting to see their faces. And if we're out at a restaurant and somebody has our wine, forget it. Like I will still be, if I'm alive at 100 years old and I'm still making wine, if somebody's drinking my wine out, I will be, ecstatic. But you pour the wine, not everybody's going to buy that wine that you make. And, you go to a restaurant and they're like, nah, it's just not for our wine list. Okay, it's okay. So I have a thick skin for that. I just got to move that over to the writing aspect now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a challenge. When writing is so much a part of us, like it comes from inside, just like dance does, I find they're very similar when you're trying to express yourself in a different way than just talking directly on the page or on the dance floor, but it's very personal.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're really kind of pouring your soul into what you're writing, and it's a different form of blood, sweat, and tears.
It is. It is. Absolutely, Lori.
All right. So, well, you obviously write very well because you won the world's best wine writer by the World Food Media Awards in Australia. So, first of all, super kudos.
Thank you.
Congratulations. But like, tell us about that experience. Like, how did you enter? Were you like, I guess I'll enter? Where do you like work us through that and then finding out that you won this incredible award?
Well, I used to enter every type of contest as a kid. I think it was the Highland dancing that got me going. But, a coloring contest, I'm in. My secret weapon, by the way, was glitter glue.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I won many tickets to movies with glitter glue. So I find it hard to resist a contest if I feel like I can enter. Of course, I never think I'm going to win, but I will go up to bat. But for this one, I was on assignment with Air Canada, our major airline. And that was a good gig. So they fly you first class when you're writing for their airline magazine. So my assignment.
oh, I have to put that in the background. Hey, United, knock, knock, knock.
Exactly. So they flew me to Australia and I was to go to all the top restaurants in Sydney and eat my heart out, drink my heart out, and write about them, and then go down to the Hunter Valley, which is only about an hour away, and write about that wine region. And so when I found out I was nominated, I was able to coordinate the trip because the award ceremony was in Adelaide. I had to fly from Sydney to Adelaide. But it was surreal because across all of the categories for the World Food Media Awards, there were about 1,000 entries. And in the World's Best Drinks Journalist category, there was an international panel of magazine newspaper editors who had shortlisted nominees that included Gerald Asher, who at the time was writing for Gourmet magazine. Tim Atkin was with the Observer newspaper in England. Some of my favorite writers, Chris Orr with Decanter magazine, Huon Hoke with the Sydney Morning Herald. So it was like, okay, I'm here anyway. I'm just going to go because it'll probably be very glamorous and they'll probably be serving some good food and wine. So that night, when they announced my name, I was sitting beside a food journalist, Lucy Waverman, and I literally asked her, did they say my name? And it was like, because imposter syndrome, anyone? Because I thought, I'm not going to go running down there like an idiot just because I think I heard them say my name. And she said, yes, get up. So anyway, yeah, that just gave me so much confidence because at that point, I had only been writing about wine for about 3 years. So that gave me the confidence to enter like the James Beard and so on. And the point, I think, of some of these writing competitions is, it's a nice ego boost, but I think like the Highland dancing competitions, it's yet another motivator for me to continue to refine my craft of writing. So there's just the joy of writing, and that's the internal motivator. But these external motivators, they help too. So at least that's the way I look at them.
That's so funny. I could envision you. Wait, no. Did they really just say my name? Really? No.
Pushing me.
No.
Stop it. Get up.
No. They couldn't have.
Yeah, no. I know. It's like, yeah. Anyway.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have to check out United and see.
Yes.
What a gig. Were they just advertising? Do they just?
Yeah, you find the editor, whoever the main editor is, cold pitch, and sort of look through if their archives of their articles are online, like especially food and drink. Take a look at what they've done, because obviously you don't want to pitch what they've recently done, but a unique angle somewhere that obviously has a big travel angle. They want to encourage people to travel to these places.
All right. They're trying to rebuild up Europe now because of the pandemic, right? I'm all for getting there. I'm all for that.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Get in there, Lori.
Yeah. All right. Mental note there. Mental note. Well, not only are you an award-winning wine writer in terms of articles and things like that, but you've written 2 books. And you mentioned it earlier, but I absolutely love the name, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, a wine-soaked journey from grape to glass.
Mm-hmm. I take my subject very seriously,
yes.
as you can tell.
Yes, you do.
Title.
You know what? I love it. It's fantastic. It is fantastic.
Thank you.
And so the research for these books must have been so torturous. You were in Burgundy and Champagne.
No little tiny sympathy violins. Yeah, no
You were
sympathy.
harvesting with Randall Graham. I
I
mean, the
know. My
research
liver for the people. Mm.
the research must have been torturous. So, tell us how torturous it was
Oh,
for that research for this book.
I don't know how I can begin to. So with Randall Graham at Bonnie Doon Winery in Santa Cruz, as I mentioned, I like day in the life. So George Plimpton was another new journalism journalist. So instead of reporting on football, he played in the NFL to write a book about it. So I'm following the sort of vibe of these crazy cats. And I asked Randall if I could come help with the harvest. And he said, sure. The thing about Randall is he kind of approaches winemaking like performance art. So he has posed purple silk cape and mask as the Rhone Ranger for the cover of Wine Spectator magazine. He actually hosted a funeral service for cork in Grand Central Station in New York. It was an open coffin filled with cork, and they had a eulogy, and all the food was black, and they paired wine with it, and it was crazy. So this guy is, but he's not a nutcase.
No, he is not.
No, he's so smart. He's written some books. He's witty as heck. And I think he really cracks through and gets his message across. His influence, I think, on American wine has been profound, and it's as deep as it is wide, because he has been an advocate for less fashionable grapes, experimental winemaking techniques, of course, unconventional marketing when it comes to wine, and levity, I think, importantly, in a business that can take itself too seriously. So I went out there, I wanted the full experience. So he said, great, carry the spit bucket. So we did the tank samples, and then he got me hauling hoses. And later that day, we were visiting vineyards. I mean, it was like a 9 or 10 hour day. I spent a few days there with him, and I was picking grapes, and the sun was just baking, but it was giving me a sense, a little bit more of an internal sense of what it's like through the harvest and what makes for good wine. Like, when are the grapes right? How do you taste that? And so all of these things came out in that experience, even though it was a bit zany as well.
I love him. I think
Yeah.
he is brilliant beyond brilliant. And the things he does are well conceived in his brain. He knows what that outcome is going to be from that, what he's going to do. And yeah, he's not crazy at all. He is
No,
beyond
he's great.
brilliant. And
Yeah.
I love how much dedication he does to the research and to, like you were saying, the underappreciated grapes and things like that. He really has helped the wine industry as a whole in such an amazing way.
He has.
And the research must have been not too bad because the book was chosen the best wine literature book. So another award for you. So how did, like, you just keep racking them up. Do you have a room of all these awards?
No,
No.
they're all in a box somewhere downstairs. It's like we moved. It's like, I am not putting these things up again. It's just like, it's a lot of, anyway, it's gratifying. But again, it's the other thing too that competition can do is spread the word. So, publishing a book these days is a slog, I'll tell you, like, not looking for pity. The research is fun, but actually trying to sell a book is very difficult. Like, publishers don't have a marketing budget anymore. Book tours are a thing of the past. They either don't have the budget or, COVID did away with that. So I'm in the process of writing my third book, which is a memoir quite different from the first two. And these awards can help spread the word about a book, just like, the Oscars do about
Right.
movies. They get a spike in sales or ticket box office. They're very useful as marketing tools as well these days.
And the whole publishing thing, I get, like, I think books have sadly have fallen by the wayside of, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in America, it seems, first of all, it went to Kindle, or, I call everything a Kindle, even though it's not really a Kindle. I've got to ask you, as an author, how do you feel about that? Like, paper in your hand versus the electronic. Do you have a preference since you are the author?
Well, I love paper books. I almost used to think of ebooks, whether they're on tablets or Kindles or wherever, are not real books. But how do you sign a Kindle? Book signings really don't work well. Let me get a marker on your device there. But the format that I increasingly love best, Lori, are audiobooks, because of course you and I are audio people. We have podcasts. So the format that gets me most excited, especially for this upcoming memoir, is audio, because I think it's such an intimate medium with the voice. And, we co-create the theater of the mind,
Right.
as we read. And I don't know, I think there's something there that goes back to childhood and being read stories by your parents that evokes that sort of closeness and that coziness. So, yeah, with
And you
this
do
one,
your
I'm,
own
yeah.
readings, right? Your
Yes.
audiobooks are your own readings. See, I
Yes.
stalk well, don't I?
You do. You're scary good.
Okay.
I
So,
applaud your stalking.
and that's got to be difficult. I very rarely do a podcast where it's me talking only. I prefer talking to people.
I do too.
But those rare podcasts where I'm just reading my script, first of all, I go off my own script. I'm the one who writes it and I go off script half the time. But it takes me 10 times as long to do that podcast, even though it's much shorter than an interview podcast. I mean, you're the one who wrote it. You know what you wrote, but your brain starts going off and your memories start coming back, right? And then
It's true.
I don't know, it must be interesting to do an audiobook. And then that's another thing. You have to get used to your own voice when you have a podcast, right?
Yes. It's true. That's true. Yeah. The audiobook is a grueling process because it's an average book of, say, 300 pages is probably anywhere from 5 to 8 finished hours, but you're going to double or triple that in terms of recording it. Yeah.
Wow.
Because lots of editing and all the rest of it. So it's just like, my mouth would get sore by the end. We do like 3 hours at a time. And I just get totally dried up and I go for a nap in the afternoon. It's like, oh my God.
Understandably.
Yeah.
Understandably.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Lori. In the show notes, you'll find my email contact, the full transcript of my conversation with Lori, links to her podcast and website, and where you can find the live stream video version of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You'll also find a link to my free ultimate guide to wine and food pairing. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/196. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or want to be a beta reader of my new wine memoir at natalie@nataliemclean.com. You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Lori. In the meantime, if you missed episode 181, go back and take a listen. This time, I'm interviewing Lori about Bordeaux wines, politics in wine, Monastrell, and Spanish food pairings. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite. You were in Bordeaux. You participated in the en primeur tasting.
It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You get to taste the wine that is bottled from barrel, and you're tasting the wines prior to their release. All of these premier tasters are there, and they rate the wines. This is what allows them to determine what price point they will do. And it also allows them to sell the wine before it's even released, which is
brilliant marketing. It's kind of like a futures market.
Exactly. It's the original futures market is what it is.
If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines and stories we discussed. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a refreshing glass of champagne for no other reason than you felt like it. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.